Hey friends, Loss Ratio here, and welcome to this episode of Loss Ratio Talks About Insurance while he tries to change the wheel hub assembly on his 2010 Ford F-150 XLT. So in this episode, I want to talk about a topic that recently came up in a LinkedIn conversation with a very prominent policyholder attorney.
Oh, really?
This attorney had shared a news article from a very well-known national news organization talking about property insurers' use of aerial surveillance.
That sounds scary.
And if you've been paying attention to news media coverage of the insurance industry over the past couple years, this topic has gotten a lot of airtime.
Insurance companies are putting up drones over neighborhoods.
From drones.
Photos taken by a drone. So they're now using drones.
Drone hired by his insurance company.
And every time I see another one of these articles pop up, I'm amazed at the lack of clarity these stories bring in terms of what's actually happening on the ground. And when you don't have clarity, people make inferences and assumptions that simply aren't true and ultimately drive false narratives. And these false narratives, in the end, just make things worse for everyone. Why do I literally never have the tool that I need? I need a 9mm box end wrench and I don't have one.
That's a big problem, guy.
11, 13, 10mm, 11mm, another 10. So what this really often boils down to is a fundamental misunderstanding between three very separate and distinct technologies that insurance carriers, along with many other industries, are utilizing when it comes to photographs taken from the sky. 7mm, 11/32? Nope. Ooh, that fits. And it stripped. And this technology has been around for quite a few years, and it is extremely valuable across many different industries and in many different ways. Brake caliper is next. So there are, again, three very distinct technologies and methods of image capture from the sky that are very important to differentiate. Because the reality of how each of these three technologies relate to consumer privacy is very distinct. I cannot see a thing with these stupid glasses. And unfortunately, every major national news media story that I have ever seen on this topic never clearly defines and differentiates between the three. So while I continue to fight here with my truck, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
All right, brake caliper coming off. Brake caliper is off. So let's take these one by one, talk about what they are and why it matters. Rotor coming off. Oh, that's heavy. Listen to this. That's really bad. Let's get this axle nut off. The three distinct categories that we're talking about here are satellite imagery, aerial imagery, and drone imagery. These are so often used interchangeably and all lumped together, but they are very distinct and different. So let's break them down one by one. We'll start with the imagery captured from the farthest away, and that is obviously satellite imagery. Now, the most common iteration of this that virtually everyone is familiar with is Google Earth or Google satellite imagery. This imagery is literally This imagery is literally available to anyone with an internet connection and access to Google. It's integrated into Google Maps, used by hundreds of millions of people every single day for everything from driving directions to real estate research. So for anyone to say that insurance carriers are using this for surveillance to spy on policyholders is a bit of a stretch, to say the least.
Don't you think that's a bit of a stretch?
Now, as the name implies, this imagery is captured from satellites orbiting the Earth many hundreds of miles high. And while this technology has advanced significantly over the last decade, there will always be several very specific limitations to this technology. We won't go deep into the technicalities here, but suffice it to say, there's only so much that's going to be visible when you're capturing images from hundreds of miles away.
That's really far away.
Regardless of the complexity of the camera and imaging systems, imagery captured from hundreds of miles away is exponentially different from imagery captured from hundreds or even dozens of feet away.
Of course it is.
I am always looking for excuses to buy new tools. So, are carriers using this satellite imagery for property underwriting purposes?
Yes, they are.
This technology can be incredibly valuable to give underwriters some understanding of a myriad of property factors and characteristics. Thousands of property underwriters across the country, across every insurance carrier, are looking at Google satellite imagery on a daily basis to help them accurately underwrite properties. And before we move on to the next category, it's important to understand a couple key limitations to this technology of satellite imagery. I literally laugh out loud every time I see a national news story refer to this as surveillance.
It's not that exactly.
And I laugh for a couple different reasons. Number one, this satellite imagery is nowhere near real time. In fact, Google themselves readily admit that the vast majority of satellite imagery is anywhere from 1 to 3 years old. So to infer or imply that insurance carriers, or any industry for that matter, is using imagery that's 1 to 3 years old to spy on what you're up to is a stretch at best. And the other aspect of satellite imagery is it's just very limited in what you can actually see and confirm. Human beings are virtually indiscernible, vehicles look like dots. So again, to call looking at this imagery an invasion of privacy, it's just not accurate in our modern world. Wow, that did not want to come off of there. Okay, now we get to throw the hammer. Pull out the tie rod end. As soon as I get these next two hub bolts out, we'll talk about aerial imagery. Oh, look how easy that is. The bearing is literally falling apart. That, my friends, is a destroyed bearing. That bearing was literally falling apart in here and creating all of these metal shavings that were creating an incredible amount of friction. And friction in this case is very bad. But you know what removes friction from the personal lines underwriting process? Self-inspection. I'm just kidding, but not really. Hit me up in the DMs. Okay, so let's move on from satellite imagery and get a little closer to Earth. Now we're talking about aerial imagery. Rather than being captured from hundreds of miles above the surface of the Earth, aerial imagery is typically captured by piloted airplanes with complex camera systems flying anywhere between 5 to 10,000 feet above the Earth.
Pretty high up there, isn't it?
The difference between photos taken from 500 miles away versus 5,000 feet away is significant.
There's a big difference.
But there are still significant limitations, and personally, I have a really hard time classifying or thinking of this aerial imagery as surveillance or spying.
I don't think that's what it is.
It's important to understand that this aerial imagery that's captured from 5 to 10,000 feet above the Earth's surface can provide significantly more meaningful and granular data than satellite imagery. But remember, it's still taken from 5,000 feet away. And even with the technological advancements over the last 5 to 10 years with these complex camera systems, you're still getting a fairly limited view. While most of the time in this aerial imagery, humans do look like humans and vehicles are easily distinguishable, that's about as far as it goes. This type of imagery is extremely valuable for property insurers, especially in the claims world, where you can easily see if a structure has been destroyed or has incurred significant damage, but it is still a very far cry from the photos that could be captured from, say, an adjuster on site. In layman's terms, I would just say that, generally speaking, this aerial imagery cannot see things that satellite imagery can't already see. However, it does bring a lot more clarity to things that are discernible.
Okay, I'm following this.
This makes it significantly more valuable than satellite imagery because property insurers can make more confident underwriting decisions based on aerial imagery. However, with that said, there is still the recency issue.
Almost forgot.
Aerial imagery is incredibly expensive to capture. So because of this, most data companies operating in this space are generally flying their aircraft and updating their imagery every 6 months.
Well, that's interesting.
So again, to think of this as any kind of real-time surveillance is just not accurate. Oh, my legs. Oh, I can't feel my legs. All right, good as new. Okay, so let's move on to drones.
Well, it's about time.
And this is where I think things get really interesting and is so often misunderstood and misconstrued in the media and subsequently across the general public. Okay, time to get messy. We are gonna get this grease all up in here. So this grease is gonna eliminate that friction. Kind of like what self-inspection does for underwriting. We're ready for our new hub assembly. Look at how beautiful that is. Nice and shiny and no grinding. So when most people use or hear the word drone, they immediately get a visual of something like this. This is a very small consumer drone that you can purchase just about anywhere for $200 to $300. And drones like this have an incredible amount of utilitarian value. Virtually every news story that I've read or seen has photos and videos of drones just like this one used in conjunction with the conversation and stories around property insurers spying on their policyholders. And quite frankly, this really grinds my gears.
Oh, really?
Because this is a huge misconception. So let's do our best to set the record straight. Obviously, the imagery captured by a drone like this one is exponentially different than that captured by aerial imagery, and even more exponentially different than that captured by satellites. I'm not happy with this right now. Okay, core crunch. When the average consumer, the average homeowner, sees one of these news stories, the inevitable takeaway is a belief and understanding that property insurers are spying on policyholders' properties with drones like this. Now, to be clear, could a property insurance carrier spy on a policyholder's property with a drone like this?
Suppose they could.
But here's the truth and reality, and don't miss this. It's just not happening. Contrary to the belief of so many, there are only a very small number of insurance carriers that are utilizing drones for underwriting in any way. And for those that are, it is only happening with express verbal consent and a scheduled appointment with a policyholder. Now, one quick caveat here. Keep in mind, I'm framing this entire conversation around the specific subject of underwriting, because that's been the focus and subject of the vast majority of these news media articles and stories. We're not talking about claims and not really talking about commercial property either. That's a completely different topic, and to varying degrees, drones are being used by the insurance industry to help adjust claims and assess property damage. And the utilization of drones for claims brings a ton of agreed value and safety for both insurance carriers and their policyholders. With that said, back to underwriting.
Look, just get to the point.
Insurance inspectors are not showing up at policyholders' properties unannounced and flying their drones over top of policyholders' rooftops without the policyholder's knowledge. It's just not happening. It's not true.
Okay, I got it.
Now, I suppose we could have a meaningful discussion and perhaps even an argument over whether or not property insurers' utilization of satellite and aerial imagery that is a minimum of 6 months old could or should be classified as surveillance or spying.
Yeah, baby.
Personally, I think that is a big stretch. So I hope this has brought some clarity and understanding to a very often confusing and misunderstood topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, or insight in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going, and I'm hopefully gonna finish fixing this truck.